feet all running like the wind. I'm sorry, boy, that we sin. Love is not like they say. I lied, it's hard to make it stay. I drown my feelings in the sea, then dried out over on the beach. Ritual unions, me, trouble again. I was wondering of a white dress and the mistress and the spirit holding my hand. Oh, better tell me how it is. I know you've been through all of this. You ran away so many times. Your kids, your heart a couple times. Love is not like they say. I lied, it's hard to make it stay. I drowned my feelings in the sea, then dried up over on the beach. Ritual unions got me trouble again.
Welcome back. I see some new faces, so I feel it's okay to say welcome back. This is the closing symposium of the 11th International Architecture Biennale Rotterdam. My name is Saskia van Stijn. We'll have a 45-minute conversation on elements of change. Well, we'll delve into tools, technologies, and scale. And for those of you who don't have quite enough, I'll be moderating a debate with Nathalie de Vries at 5 o'clock during the AFFR, which is really the last thing we'll be doing this year. But I do want to commemorate that I phoned her to say, what are we going to talk about? And the first thing she said, we are, of course, really part of the problem, but also part of the solution. So I thought that was coming from her. I don't know who the we is. Is that MVRDV or we as a practice? But that's at least a promise for a very nice and engaging afternoon. As said, the last part of 3. I'm very, very happy to give the word to Jonna Bijstrik, an architect, a writer, an educator. She runs the master department at the Academy of Architecture in Amsterdam, but of course here as one of the driving forces of the curatorial team behind Nature of Hope. Please give it up for Jonna Bijstrik.
All right. It's kind of hard to imagine that this is already the last day. Having worked on this for over a year with a wonderful team, we have to say goodbye. But I'm really happy that we can share these last moments and also exchange the knowledge that was actually built out during the collaborations of the past year with all the wonderful contributors to the show. So if you will allow me a few more words of introduction relating this closing session to the exhibition, which is also closing today, of course. So where we all started over a year ago was actually this diagram was part of our conversation. The previous panel already positioned so wonderfully the need to talk about systems, dominating systems, and how systems in a way also gear towards certain change, but not necessarily all the change that we need to gear for. So this is a diagram that we used a lot in our conversations during the preparation of the exhibition and the programming. It's a diagram by IPCC, so the UN Panel for Climate Change, and IPBS, the UN Panel for Biodiversity, which in 2021 for the first time set out like what do our action means for biodiversity, what do our actions, so literally placing of those windmills, literally transitioning to new forms of energy, but also food production and ecosystem management on each other. And what came out of this slightly cryptic diagram is that if we look at climate actions, a lot of them have a detrimental effect on biodiversity systems and actions. If we look at biodiversity actions, pretty much all of them turn blue, meeting positive also for our climate actions. From this, in a way, was a takeaway kind of in our practice as architects. We also have to not only gear towards climate actions and degrowth actions that we, I think, have become familiar in the way we practice and in the way we talk. We don't yet practice it all around, but the language is starting to develop, to actually start to narrate from this relationship to our nature and our environments for a pluriversal existence. And so another point of this transition and shift in systems that we're seeing and also positioning in the exhibition is that yes, we are still getting used to the idea of a pluriversal design, an idea of designing for other than human perspective. It's still very much in transition. But if we look at the field of jurisprudence, policy making, if we look at those fields, we actually see that since 2000s, more than 500 examples of personhood have been legally attributed to entities across the world. In other words, kind of in a way, we could say the design world has to play catch up at this point, and that the legal systems are taking the lead on that pluriversal perspective from the perspective of other than humans. This is a work from the show, and this is the only one I'll share in this way, where together Alex and Katja, Alex is trained in the field of law. Katja is an urban designer from MIT Sensible Cities Lab. And what they've done is that they've created this creature that in a way, for many of our Western perspectives, are defining this nature-culture dialogue. And in a lot of it is embedded in how we practice our design, positioning ourselves always in some kind of dualism. Citing the works of many wonderful authors from Donna Haraway to Jane Goodall to Rachel Carson, that kind of we need to talk about these dualisms and become aware that we don't design nature for our sake, but we design nature also for nature's sake. We really have to engage with this restoration project of nature in all our capacities and all our different fields. To bring it a little bit more precisely, of course, many of these climate actions talk about afforestation project, but we really need to talk about forest restoration project. Massive difference, similar words. And even bringing it home closer to architecture, CLT, cross-laminated timber, is one type of practice that is currently incredibly prioritized in the Netherlands. But do we have the forest to sustain this production? Do we have the logistics, the roads, and so on to actually understand this as a climate-efficient form and a biodiversity-efficient form of practice? Or is this simply replacing the old with the new with very little consideration for the environment? And on the right, you see work by Kiel Mo. So this is the same author as the beautiful image of the Seagram building that you see up front. This is his new work where he's embarking in how can we use forest management strategy, so literally taking care of our forest as a way to understand what is the species, what are the trees that are coming out of it, and what kind of production materials can they deliver, rather than raising forests to then be cut down for production of our homes. And so we find ourselves in these very many transitions happening all at the same time. And this is something we really tried to bring into the show, talking to the wonderful people that we had this amazing year with, that are all speaking from different positions of practitioner, designer, theorist, artist, of where is the change that is happening, in what ways is it systemic, in what ways is it part of a bigger conversation. And all in kind of gearing and trying to imagine collectively a situated practice where buildings are not imposed on us, but are part of our environments and part of our collective identity and part of our collective narrative. And so kind of rushing you through that, today we're going to also launch and celebrate the beginning of a publication of this edition of the IABR, The Nature of Hope. But I think a person that we truly miss today, but unfortunately he couldn't be here, is Olaf Gravert. So in the exhibition, he is part of the House Europe initiative, talking about this policy change in relation to demolition. The reason that we do want to share this notice with you is he will explain what House Europe is, but also because he was instrumental in bringing in also Evop, Johannes, and Bernard, who are here with us today, and also bringing in the collaboration with Arc Plus onto the stage. So he's been a key person in our network, in our developing of the exhibition as well. So here's a few words from Olaf with his umbrella.
My name is Olaf Grawat. I'm speaking on behalf of House Europe, the European Citizens Initiative to Power Renovation. We have been part of this year's Rotterdam Biennale, and we were also invited to speak at the closing event. Unfortunately, we cannot participate because we ourselves are in the middle of preparing our House Europe Assembly, which is our big launch event for the initiative. Nevertheless, we were asked to record this message and address you to actually raise awareness for our initiative, the topic and our goals. And I want to thank you, the Biennial, not only for this opportunity, but for supporting the initiative in a very early stage, because actually we are still in the network building phase, and it was a great help for us to already have the presence in such an important show. So I really want to thank you for the trust that you actually gave us. So thank you. What is House Europe? As I mentioned, House Europe is a European Citizens Initiative. It's an initiative that comes up with new legislation to make renovation and transformation of existing buildings the new norm. One has to understand that currently we operate in a system in which the old cannot compete with the new. So every building is up for demolition because potentially almost every building promises more profit. In that logic, we have to change the system to make the renovation and transformation of existing buildings a common path. What we try to do as an initiative is come up with 3 legal proposals that make the renovation easier, more affordable and socially inclusive. A European Citizens Initiative gives actually citizens the possibility to propose laws, new legislation, and push them into the European Parliament. From there, they are actually checked for their effects and then implemented on a European level, and then every member state has to follow them and implement them in their national laws. What you have to do is propose a law and collect 1 million signatures across at least 7 EU countries. And the Netherlands are one of our 7 chosen countries. Meanwhile, we have partners in almost all European countries, but nevertheless, we have to pass a certain benchmark in 7 countries. Therefore, it's super important that we have this opportunity to address you as an audience and actually ask you for your help. We need your help. We need the help of a lot of citizens who actually tell our story and explain to others why we need to give new value to existing buildings. So there are 3 easy steps that you can already do today. The first one is sign up for our newsletter on houseeurope.eu and follow us on Instagram. These are the 2 easiest ways to stay informed about the initiative. The second one is become a supporter and help us collect signatures. The signature period will start on February 1st, 2025 and will last for 1 year. You have to imagine if we turn around the number of 1 million, if we find 3,000 supporters in our countries and every supporter collects 1 signature a day, 365 days, we are successful in reaching our goal. So we need to find 3,000 supporters who are dedicated to collect 1 signature a day. Which brings us basically to the third point. How you can really help us is tell a friend about House Europe. Explain them why it is important to keep existing buildings and why we need this legal change. Thank you very much and enjoy your event. Bye.
And here's House Europe. You can also find it in the exhibition after this for 30 minutes. And we move on to Victor. I'd like to introduce Victor. Law and legal studies have been mentioned a few times. Victor also quit law school to become a writer and architect. He publishes with multiple avant-garde publications in Germany. At the moment, he's also editor of Arc Plus and was the key editor for the younger voices of Arc Plus in the architecture, the business of architecture issue. And so we thank you for your incredible collaboration. It was all very last minute. It was all in impossible timelines, but I think we have a beautiful publication with us today. So.
Hi, thanks a lot. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I have no slides today. I think you can bear with me for 10-ish minutes. I'm Victor. Thanks for having me. I'm an editor with Arc Plus. For those who don't know Arc Plus, who doesn't know Arc Plus? Okay, so for the three of you, we are a journal for architecture and urbanism. We were founded in 1967-68, and if that year is any indication, you can tell that we are interested in the relationships, the relations of production within architecture, and that is not just the conditions that architecture produces in the real world, but also the conditions under which that architecture is produced. We are based in Berlin now, and we publish in German, but sometimes also in English, and that is one of the reasons I was invited to join the conversation today, because together with Nature of Hope and the IABR director and its curators, we decided to team up and publish an issue on the tension that exists between the social and ecological aspirations of the architectural practice and, let's say, the real world conditions under which this has to happen, that is the realities of the job of being an architect or a spatial planner. So the issue is called The Business of Architecture. It's officially out today. You can also find it over there in the Nieuwe Instituut bookstore. So although most of this issue was published last year in German, and at first, the conversation taking place in this issue is actually mirrored in so many ways in the beautiful exhibition you see over there that it just made total sense to team up with Nature of Hope to make this publication available in English and carry this conversation out into the world. So you can maybe not consider it as an exhibition catalog because only a few positions are mirrored in there, but the conversation is, so you can maybe consider it an auxiliary or appendix to the entire exhibition. So after all, the topic obviously of architectural work is not new. Every few years, the spatial disciplines, mostly in times of crisis, they stop for a moment looking at the conditions that they produce, and they remind themselves that they also are produced by certain conditions. And because let's face it, our work as spatial practitioners is something, for many of us at least, something of a pact. You give up a lot of material benefits that you could have gotten in almost any other line of work with a 5-year university degree. And you trade that for the promise of doing something that is hopefully fulfilling, that is creative, and in the best case scenario, also something that is for the common good. And once in a while, this balance seems very, very off. And many people right now are questioning, rightfully, is it still worth it? And this was a question that the younger editors working at Arc Plus were asking themselves in 2022. So this was in the second half of the pandemic when I also joined the editorial team. And so it was mostly led by a very online and very American discourse through memes, Instagram, Twitter, asking spatial practitioners once again to consider themselves as workers. And I think more than just looking at this one side of the equation of what our workers' rights are in this situation, I think this moment during COVID was very, very significant, and also the reason why we started picking up this topic again was that during COVID, two things coincided for this gain of consciousness, and that's at once we had an economic downturn threatening actual jobs, and on the other side you had a growing contestation in the years prior of the effects of the practices that we are practicing. So whereas before usually there was one type of crisis, either economic or philosophical, let's say, and you could talk about one of the two while disregarding the other. You were, for example, talking about workers' rights in the 70s during the oil crises, but not looking really at the effects of the practice, or you were, as in the years before the pandemic, in a relatively economically good situation, talking about the effects. And now these two things at once converged, and so we thought this was really fertile soil. So, as I said, this conversation was already going on when I joined the team, but I jumped on the occasion to work on this publication, and I think it's also due, obviously, to the medium of a magazine that takes 1.5 years to become something instead of a meme that is formulated or a tweet that can only have 280 characters. But so we tried not to look at the easy solutions and try to really look at both sides of this equation. At once, what are our rights as workers? How do we define that? And on the other side of that equation, what is the product we are giving up so much for? Is that still a product we want to be giving that much up for? And so that's why the essays and the interviews and the many office profiles that we have in this issue, it's really hard to sum up 200 pages of content here, I realize. They're spread across 3 sections. The first one is occupation versus vocation, which asks whether our job as architects is really that unique to warrant this kind of compromise. The second is called value versus values, where we ask what do we actually optimize for inside our companies or inside our offices. Is it financial things or is it ethics? And the third section is called commodity versus community, that focuses on the product of what do we actually produce and who do we want as our clients. So in there you will find many examples of how the practice is already changing, and I will not go into more detail than that, but these 3 word pairs are really reflective of the scope of solutions that we found are already available, and also reflective of the internal debate we had, because obviously there is no single, simple solution to answer all of these questions. And so, for example, we have 3 different editorials in there, because even inside the editorial offices, we could not agree on a single way to portray what kind of conversations were happening in here. So, as I said, no unified theory of how the practice will look like in the future, but I think especially the office profiles in here, we profile a lot of different offices that try to practice differently today. Some of you might know some of these in there, and I think one of the most particularly convincing, to me at least, we have the pleasure of having here today, IFUP, they're sitting right there, that have centered their whole business around the concept of the economy for the common good. And so this multiplicity of perspectives looking at the thing from different sides is, I think, one of the 2 reasons that we decided to collaborate with IABR's director and the curators for Nature of Hope, because just as us, they also look full scope at things, as you can see in this very crowded but very good exhibition. And they also explain their curatorial approach to Nature of Hope in a very beautiful 10-page contributions in there. So I want to thank once again Saskia as the director, and also the 5 curators, Jana, Catherine, Hani, Lena, and Noortje. Also Olaf, who you saw earlier, who brought us together for this enriching collaboration. And I will end this rant, or this rambling, or whatever, with maybe the second reason that we decided to collaborate and that made this collaboration so fruitful, and that's the thread at the core of both this issue and the exhibition Nature of Hope, and that's the topic of hope. I think none of us would be doing what we are doing currently, and also I think, given the topic of today, no one would be here today if we did not share the belief that there is a better way forward of practicing architecture, and not fall back on architecture as just a job. just some random job that you do to pay the mortgage, because honestly, it's not enough money for that. And the hope that this pact that we have chosen to enter might one day be worth it, and not just worth it for us, but also worth it for the world we set out to improve. So thank you very much, and I look forward to discussing with you.
Victor, thank you for that. Thank you for bringing the two perspectives together. We now switch quickly to the next speaker, Esther Turnhout. I'm incredibly honored to introduce you here. You come from a very different world. You are the chair of Science, Technology and Society at University of Twente. You identify today as an interdisciplinary social scientist, but you have your origin in ecology. And I think you're also part of the IPBS mentioned earlier, the UN panel of biodiversity and system. You also wrote two publications this year. One was co-authored. One is A Better Knowledge is Possible, Transforming Environmental Science for Justice and Pluralism. And the second one, Raising the Carbon Forest, Science and Technology of Singularization. I think both, just in their title alone, already represent much of the conversations that we were having here. And this is also what brought us into many conversations by now. Your work in science is very similar to what Nature of Hope is trying to position from the perspective of architecture. So thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me and for such a generous introduction. Oh, the light is a little bit. Like Jana also said, most of my career is focused on biodiversity and nature conservation, and particularly the contribution or lack of thereof, actually, the contribution of science to the protection of nature and biodiversity. Because for several reasons that indeed I've written about, but will not explain in detail here, I've actually come to the conclusion that, unfortunately, and also despite the best intentions of many of the scientists, science is actually, well, it has become a bit of an obstacle for the transformations that we need to secure a healthy and livable planet for humans and nature. Much like Dirk Sijmons said earlier this afternoon, scientists are not necessarily the good guys here either. So a couple of years ago at the University of Twente, we tried to do things differently, and we entered into a unique collaboration as part of a project called Biotraces with the grassroots citizen initiative called Food Park Amsterdam. And they are doing amazing work to protect the Lutkemeerpolder in Amsterdam from the construction of warehouses. And on this slide shows a picture of the area. And we also have a video in the show, so perhaps you can take a look to learn more. Now, in this collaboration, we use quite a radical participatory action research approach that includes an important role of volunteering. This basically means that we join the movement, and we have learned so much from this. So to tell you a little bit of the story, one striking aspect of the food park case is that much more is going on than simply a fight between economy versus ecology or people versus nature. What we've learned is that our approach to nature is part of the problem. The current government of the city of Amsterdam, and this is tragic, is perhaps one of the greenest that we have. And at the same time, they are doing this. So they treat nature as green infrastructures that need to be managed and optimized. And ecologists are a huge part of this because they provide measures and metrics. And what these measures and metrics do, they allow green areas to be compared and contrasted and ranked. So what happens is that according to that logic, Lutkemeer may not score so high as a different area somewhere else. So a green government, like we have in the city of Amsterdam, will value nature, but also will want to have a bang for their buck. So they focus on saving the more valuable areas. But of course, what this does, and what ecologists then also actively contribute to, it produces a license to destroy lower-ranking areas. And in itself, this may even be justifiable, if not, that this is a cycle that repeats itself. So the next policy will again request prioritization. Ecologists will design metrics and measures that will justify the destruction of areas that now rank bottom, because the rest is gone. And so we go on. So this is really one reason why science, and also its sort of favorite relationship to policy making, needs to change. So instead of enabling destruction by designing metrics that standardize nature and make it exchangeable, we need to focus on context, situatedness, and relationships. Instead of managing land as property, we need to democratize through commoning approaches and resist the modernist paradigm that separates people from nature. Now this, we believe, will help academics to go beyond the cruel optimism of clean technocratic solutions, avoid the neglect that we currently see of the negative consequences of those solutions, and also prevent political naivety about the obstacles to change. So this Biennale has explored the question of the nature of hope. Now, what I've learned from Foodpark Amsterdam is that hope resides at the intersection between utopianism and realism, not just imagining a better world, but also prefiguring it in practice and engaging in struggle and advocacy against threats, including threats from presumed green. So change is work and practice, and hope is a verb. Our collaborative project, hopefully, is an example that others can follow. But in that same spirit of hope, we need to recognize that this will meet resistance. And I encounter a lot of that because of dominant professional norms of what it means to be a scientist, of what it means for science to relate to policy and society that stand in the way of progressive practices, but also vested interests and egos in science, and a fear, a topic that was also mentioned before, a fear of losing power. So we also need to develop capacities of researchers to learn that they can do research differently and what options are available. We don't need to leave research in order to do research differently. And that is really an important message here that I've also heard echo before in the context of design and architecture. So I also wanted to end with an example of a course that we teach for PhD students, where we mix natural and social environmental scientists mostly at this moment, but it would be actually really nice to also have design and architecture PhDs. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. I think we'll pick up on a couple of things that you already mentioned, but before we get into conversation, I'd like to introduce Johannes Krone and Berhard Kurtz from IFUB. They've already been mentioned a few times today. A fantastic duo that are now working in a larger community in south of Germany. They're focusing very much on the working conditions of their office, but also value-based work and commitment to economy for the common good. So I'll keep it very short and let you explain what all that means. You can use those, of course, yeah.
Okay, just we give a short introduction on who we are. We are a small architecture firm from South and North Germany, like all over the place. We have an office in Munich, in Berlin, and one at Lake of Constance. We founded ourselves basically motivated by frustration about the working conditions we worked in. I think some architects might relate. And then we wanted to found us not as Bernhard and Johannes architects. We wanted to start something that might grow, not only with us, but with other people, like to start something like a community. Oh, wrong direction. So that's our awesome team. We're 11 people now. we do architecture. We're not going to talk much about it. We try to refurbish a lot, like reorganize existing buildings, and if we have to build new, we try to do it like ecological as possible. But then we are again frustrated, and because we operate in a system that gives us not too many space to navigate the way we want to go. And then some years ago we came across a very nice concept that that fitted us very well, and Bernhard is going to explain that now.
Before we're getting into that, I'd like all of us to take a step back. We've heard a lot about, like, all the input we got today was just kind of leading up to what we're going to talk about, but to really get into what are our thoughts, I'd like you all to close your eyes for a second and go back in your memories and find yourself the spot or the day in your life where you were the most happy.
Now open your eyes.
So we only were supposed to talk 7 minutes, but I'm going to steal one for you to find that day. And if you have found that day or that moment in your life where you were really happy, you would love to go back there one day, just try to fit it into one word and hold on to that. Do you all have a word to hold on to? Yeah, I see some people nodding, so we can go to the real stuff now. Now you're all really happy and smiling. Now we can deal with what are we facing now? Yes, that is what the news are telling us every day. It's not much hope, but more or less a lot of crises that we are facing. And the thing is, where are all these crises coming from? That is the big questions that we are asking ourselves all the time, and also what is the reasons why we are failing as architects all the time. And I want to talk to you about the eternal growth of the GDP. Does everybody know what the GDP is? Hands up. GDP? Yes, very good. But most of you probably don't know it's only been introduced until in 1942. It was actually a measurement to check how well a country could build up the armaments for the war. And that is the main actual number that we are following or that we are using to evaluate societies or our own success. I love that quote from Robert Kennedy, already made in 1968, where he says, the gross domestic product, it measures everything, but in short, except those things that make life worthwhile. I'm going to make a few examples. A forest, for example, is only in the GDP once it's cut down. If you're healthy, really bad. Get sick now, because that's going to run the health system. It's really awesome if you go out and a car runs over you. Accidents, wars, crises. I mean, climate change, not so bad, because we're going to have all those floods and all those things that will destroy things, so we have to build new stuff. So this product, this gross domestic product, doesn't tell anything about what makes our life good. It just talks about a number. It's a number on paper, and we are following. You can watch the news every day, and someone talks about growth. It's ridiculous what we want to grow. So I really like that graph, even though there is very little data on the life satisfaction of people. But if you compare the GDP to the life satisfaction, you can see that it was rising until the 60s, 70s, until everybody had sort of like recovered from the Second World War. You had a house or roof, you had water, you had maybe electricity or whatever, food. And afterwards, other things were getting important. So we are not happy. The GDP growth doesn't make us happy. It doesn't measure equality, it doesn't measure bravery, it doesn't measure health, education, all that things that make life worthwhile. And now who wants to say the word that you thought about when I first thought you? What was the nicest moment in your life? Who wants to share a word? You can just throw it in.
I like climbing mountains.
Climbing mountains. Walk. Food. Freedom. Play. I'm just going to ask the other way around. Who of you thought of money? Your last SUV you bought? Or the first million that you made? No? So this is not what makes us, this is not what makes us humans. Wealth, how we define the word wealth, is just so ridiculous because it has nothing to do with what we are as humans. So this is the totally wrong thing that we're following. So we are stuck in that situation, huh? But what would be a new goal for our society? That is a big question. We have been asking ourselves this ridiculous question, and there are various new visions in the world out there. If you read a lot, like I do, you have maybe heard about the donut economy or the post-growth economy. The one that we are particularly fond of is the vision or the concept of the economy for the common good. And I'm just quickly going to explain you what it is about. Basically, it's about acting what is written in our constitution. Most constitutions in the world contain this in some kind of written phrase. So it says capital is the means to a purpose, and the purpose is to increase the common good. No constitution in the world says capital is our purpose. None. But that's what we are doing. That's what our government is doing. That's what our economy is doing. That's what we are all following. So let's go and sue the government for that. Maybe not so easy, but what we are trying now is we are following the concept of economy for the common good. The econ good, in short, it tries to establish a new ethical economic model, and it's not communism and it's not capitalism. It's something new. It tries to make money no longer the goal of our economic activity, which is not so easy. And the goal is the common good, which means nothing more than a good life for everybody on the planet, including plants and animals. I was asked that recently. Yeah. So how is the idea? The basic idea is currently every organization has to make a financial balance sheet. The only time my city contacts me is if I don't deliver my financial balancing. Das Finanzamt in Germany, yeah? So the sole marker that is used to value and tax organizations in the Western societies is money. And it's also because that's the only thing that we getting asked. Did you earn enough? Not even asking if I paid my employees enough. Interesting. Yes, so EconGet says, let's try and shift that focus. Every organization should make a common good balance in addition to the financial balancing. So what does it do? First of all, it's better self-assessment. It's like looking into the mirror for the first time. It also would help to the government to use certain tools to affect what you're going to take out of it, or make out of it. So you could use it for the evaluation and the taxation of a company, but you could use it for awarding contracts, and you could use it for approving loans or anything like that. So you would immediately shift the focus to the common good. So I'm not just going to tell you about this concept, but what we did in the office, we did that. We wanted to find ways of doing more. We tried everything in architecture. We failed most of the time. We tried to be social in our operation, but also that is kind of a hard thing. So what we wanted to have input. In short, what econ good means, it's a new vision away from capitalism and communism. It's a valid alternative. It's a vision of the future. It's relatively easy to implement. We don't have to have the breakdown or a war before starting new. It's a transformation tool. And it's a way to get to the root of a problem and not treating symptoms, what we usually do. Most of the solutions that we produce as architects, also out there, is solutions to problems and not getting to the root of a problem, unfortunately. So we don't have much time left, so Johannes is going to just tell you quickly on 2 slides, how does econ good change an architecture office?
So there's first. Oh, that's your slide still.
Sorry, that's the wrong slide. Yeah, on in the end, when you do a common good balancing, you look at every part what you do in your business. So I really like that to tell that you have to look at this matrix on the right down. It's 20 points, and each point has 2 to 4 lower points that you have to talk about. It's 57 points in total, and in one we talked about architecture, and in the 56 others we talked about all the other things. How do you treat your employees? Who owns the money? What happens with the money? What do you do with the other architectures' offices? How do you treat your clients or your supply chain, or society? And we used it to change our office as well.
Yeah, and then first we are still architects, so the first thought was we have to somehow find out and define for ourselves, because one part of this econ good balancing is that you are forced to write things down. You're asked, what's your concept about this? And you write it down. And I think by writing things down is like drawing a plan, you rethink things, and you try to condense them and find concepts. And so the first thing we did was trying to articulate what we think architecture should be like, and what guides us through the steps of a project. Like in the beginning, we could question that the first symbol: do we need this building, or could we just not build it? So don't build a building, and then like repair a building, make it small if it's possible, then big, make it changeable, build for the people, and then in the end also like should be nice. Someone said this today that it keeps a building alive. No, if we look at the listed buildings now, the monuments, they are nice, and then the more technical parts, like it should be circular, or the material should be good. So by writing this down, it was nice for us to like condense our thoughts, but also it was nice to communicate it within the office and outside the office. Maybe we go to the next slide. This was about the architecture, and then it just does not just touch the architecture, but an office is a complex thing. No, you can define goals, you can define the product you sell, you can define working conditions, and you have to deal with money and power. And then I think I would just pick out some some examples. What I think is really important or striking is that we decided to give away. We founded the company. It's a limited, like he owns 50%, I own 50%. We could just take out the money and do whatever. We don't. We gave that away. We leave all the money in the company, and we decide as a team what to do with it. Do we raise our salaries, or do we give it away? Do we start some research project, or whatever? And I think this is one important thing. And then the other important thing I just mentioned is like we try to make decisions in a team. Like we try to be a group of people who treats each other decently. And I think this is part of it. So maybe some more
transparency, maybe.
Ah, yeah, that's and we are fully transparent on our money flows.
32-hour week.
Yeah, you can name some more.
The thing is, what is if I would I could go in there. A lot of these things, if we talk about change, we usually talk about things we lose. We'd like to talk about the things we'll gain. Who of you knows John Maynard Keynes, the big guy of capitalism of beginning of the 19th century? He said 1930, in 100 years' time, we only have to work 15 hours a week. You're far away from that. We've produced some kind of society or economy that produces needs, but it just for being happy people, for fulfilling the basic needs of our society, and then we could look for something else. We could do in 15 hours a week easily. We are there already, but instead we work 40, 50, 60 hours. So let's have a look on what we can gain, and that's what we're trying to show. So we have implemented the 32-hour week in our office to make space for other things. Engagement, for example. Or
yeah,
kids.
maybe one other thing I would like to say in the end, because sometimes people say, well, how do you do it? How do you make money? How do you feed your kids? But I think one aspect is we broaden our services. We do architecture, but we have 2 employees who are now educated energy consultants, and we consult on sustainability. And even though it's like a decline in the building industry, we are good off. We are growing slowly, but we are growing, and we can feed our kids. And I think it's I doubt that we would be in such a good place if we wouldn't have gone in that more radical way of transition.
Yes.
That was it. Thanks.
It was not so important.
Okay, all right. Esther, Victor, would you mind joining us on stage? I'm missing a mic. Since we're over time quite a bit, I'd like to open up to the audience immediately. Are there any questions for our speakers of the last panel? I was wondering how you see each other's work, because I think you all come from very different perspectives, the practice of looking at science and the many narratives of the exhibition, but also the role of writing. If you have thoughts on kind of either collaborations or the models that the other people are reflecting on.
Yeah, perhaps I could start this, because I also thought we were all given the same time, and that, yeah, something happens, and I don't know yet what to feel of that and what to make of that, but that was odd. Just wanted to say that. And I also think that that's important. I'm saying this because it's important. So we are... and this is what happens a lot, right? So you're in these spaces, and you want to practice what you preach, and I see that that is incredibly hard, and it's a lot of work. So what I admire so much about Food Park Amsterdam is that they use this combination of political activism and struggle with prefiguration, so with practicing what you preach, like we also heard from IFUP, and the norms that they apply to themselves, and the norms, the role that they want to play in the world. I find it really quite astonishing how far the scientific world is from that realization, that it is the scientists. Ironically, paradoxically, I have all kinds of feelings about this actually, but when it's actually the environmental scientists that have these stories about collapse and urgency and all these things that are actually hoarding power and resources, that are actually not creating this more equitable landscape in which diverse perspectives can have an equal contribution. So I think that is really astounding. And if I would have also taken a bit more time for my talk, that's what I would have elaborated a little bit on more, I think. I think the research community, the scientific community, is nowhere near the realization that they're part of the problem. Also, by the way they work internally. I'm actually quite hopeful of what I'm hearing here, and I think, well, science is not the front runner here.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I do underscore also what you're saying, that the formats are important, and it's important to kind of operate within the agreed formats, indeed.
Yeah, I like the thought on what you talked about. It's like how you have to show how to do things before you can go out. I mean, I could walk around and try to be missionary and go to all my friends and tell them, oh, you have to work less or whatever. But it's better to just do it yourself and show that you can do a 32-hour week and still have a thriving office. And we have every hour is paid, and we treat them well and whatever. We have fun in the office. We are a team. We do good architecture also. I mean, ecological architecture doesn't have to look boring. All these things, if you show them, this makes people believe in that you can do it. I mean, can you, for example, it was very cool what you showed us before. I mean, whenever you do something for the first time, or whenever you show that it's possible, this opens up the minds of people, and we are trying to do that in architecture, but I think we have our main focus on changing our office, and by that changing other offices, because the architecture office field is, sorry for that.
And one follow-up question to you, the team of IFOP. To what extent the guidelines that you're following as an office in the practice of economy for common good is already an established guidelines, or are you inventing them for yourself and interpreting of what does that mean in an architectural office setting?
I'd say it's a mix. Yeah, and I wouldn't say that the economy of the common good is like, they don't tell you what to do. They ask questions. It's more like a therapy. So, and then, for example, one example, it's pretty easy, like, what does the money do you earn? And then you can find a nice bank. There's the GLS bank in Germany that's quite...
Triodos in home.
That's quite okay, but then you think about insurances. And we have an agent who gives us insurances. And we ask him every year again, like, maybe there's now a good insurance that has a nice policy that is sustainable, and there's none every year. But we keep on asking, and I think going through the process, we learned a lot where to ask questions, and even to optimize or be more aligned to the common good in fields we didn't even think about. And
on the other hand, we are if you look at, for example, steward ownership as a concept. I don't know if you have heard about it. It's quite an old concept that says money should stay inside the company and nobody outside the company can make decisions. These are the two main parts of steward ownership, and there is a big it's a big subject in at least Germany. That concept already exists. We are trying to live it that way. So we just picked up something that we read. On the other hand, some solutions we make up ourselves, like the 10 points that you said that you've seen about how we do architecture. That is something we invented ourselves because there is nothing out there that would fit our needs.
One last question, and then we close the...
Yeah, it's a question for IFUP, and maybe also for Arch Plus, the subject of business of practice. So the architectural profession has a problematic relation to work, historically and so on. I think everybody who is in architecture knows it. We sometimes think that in Germany it's better than in Belgium, but maybe it isn't. It's very commendable, that you are looking as a German practice, to design other processes to reflect about certain choices that you've made. We try to do the same thing in Belgium with BC architects, studies, materials, and so on, with everybody who works there. One of the basic decisions that we have taken was that, in fact, when you work for an organization and you get your salary from that organization, but then the kind of value that is created is in fact being built up within the organization, but the salaried people are not part of the organization. And so we decided quite early to say everything that is being built up is not from the founders. There's actually, founder is a concept, but it's not the reality in the day-to-day build-up of the practice. It's in fact of everybody who puts their efforts and their skills and their talents and their vision into it. And so my question is a little bit, what's your view on this? The fact that companies pay people for services, but for the rest there might be some teamwork and some decision making. But in fact, the workers are most of the time not owners, part owners of the companies, not shareholders. So we decided to let everybody be a shareholder after an engagement of 1 year, that they have to choose, is this really something for me or not? After 1 year, they become shareholder, they become part of what we're constructing together. So how do you see that in your choice making of how to organize an architectural practice?
I think like on the paper, we are not sharing the possession of our company with everybody, but we decided not to connect the earning of money to the possession of the company. So we don't earn more because we own the company. So we are somehow treating ourselves the same way we treat our employees. And there's a legal structure for a company that's actually in discussion at the moment.
Steward ownership.
Is it called steward ownership then? Okay. And we want to do that, but we have a lot of stuff to do. So we wait for that to happen, and until we just behave like that.
It is actually an interesting thing because first of all, in our office now, it's money doesn't go to the owners, and so it stays in the company. And the second thing is that everybody in the company, even though they are not shareholders, can make decisions. Or we do the main decisions all together. So I've asked all of us, because we're talking them each year in 4 to our 4I. Yeah, you know what I mean. I asked all of them. Do you want to have shares? And they're like, okay, I don't get more money and I don't have more decision power. Why should I get shares? So in a way, kind of it's not that important anymore. Even though I would like them to have shares, because it would take off also kind of responsibility that I feel from our shoulders. So and also it's very important. It's transformation. We have to. Most people are not taught to behave in those ways. They're not taught to do the decisions. They're not taught to be good in communications. They're not taught to be making decisions in a group. All these things, everybody in our office has to learn again. So this is a process. Also, we also had to learn how to do a 32-hour week. All these things, we thought it's easy. Oh, okay, 4-day week, yeah. The reaction of a group were not so, yeah. So it's a learning process.
Could I pivot to science? Victor, is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. I was just wondering. As you wish. As you wish. No, because I wanted to kind of. It's a question also both to you. That's why I want to pivot slightly, maybe a little bit further away. How do you see the transition in the collaboration between science and a design practice such as architecture, from your perspective in writing and from your perspective in academia?
I think there's so many opportunities, but I see that from my little corner of academia, it's incredibly difficult. And it's difficult, we're also noticing that this collaboration with Food Park is really difficult because we constantly bump up against expectations they have of us as experts of something, expectations that we have of them, notions of activism versus science that are often put against each other, norms of neutrality that really get into the way. So it's really hard. I actually think that the design parts of academia can form a little bit of a bridge, because they're less hung up about scientific neutrality and those sorts of things, and have less problematic norms about those. But then at the same time, I've also noticed that there's also interesting parallels, like this notion of the unique genius or the isolated expert individual that I thought would be less prominent in the creative fields. It could actually be worse. So we are, yes. Well, this was a surprise. I didn't expect that. So I think
it's worse even, I guess.
Yeah. So we need to get out of our comfort zone, and I think precarity that has been built into academic institutions is also, I think, very prominently in your fields, makes people scared, and makes people in a hurry. And that sort of kills creative thinking, it kills solidarity, and it kills collaboration. So I think we really need to step out of this mode that we think that we are in a hurry, we think we are precarious, and we are so afraid. And that's incredibly hard.
Yeah, I think it's, to jump in, it's okay to be humble. Sometimes it's okay to also not want to be a shareholder of the company you're working with. It's okay to just want this as a job sometimes. So that's maybe to reply to your question. And I think when I spoke about the pact, there's not one solution to the pact of what you trade for what. It's where you fall on the spectrum and making that possible for everyone. And to reply to your question, it's also okay to be humble. As an architect, we are taught in university, for me it wasn't that long ago, taught that we are master problem solvers for everything. We design solutions for everything. Even though we often apply solutions, we learn from so many other disciplines, as we can see in the exhibition. There are so many other disciplines offering so much to what we can learn. We don't have to build everything from scratch and solve every problem from scratch. I think, yeah, it's okay to be humble.
I think those are beautiful words to end this session and end this edition. Apologies for running so massively over time. Thank you for all the panelists for your attention.
And I will humbly ask if I can still thank a few people. I'm very sorry. I have to be in a panel in 10 minutes, and it's a 15-minute cycle. But I would not be standing here without the complete devotion towards Nature of Hope. I'm going to only go for the first names. Thank you so much, Jana, Catherine, Alina, Hani, and Noortje. It's been a fabulous ride, and I'm very indebted to your energy. We won't clap at anything. I'm trying to speed up, but the team IABR, because I'm standing here, but behind, carried literally by a group of amazing people. Nienke, Roos, Elise, Sabine, Jontja, Johanna, Maaike, Lena, Vivian, Reineke, Venla, Maria, the builders, and I say sorry to all my family and friends who I've neglected terribly over the last year. I say welcome to a temporal member of our team, Gabriel. I thank the beautiful graphic design by Studio Leroy Clermont and the spatial advice given by Studio DP. So thanks Diogo and Gonzalo. All the contributors to both the panel here today, as well as the public program and the exhibition Nature of Hope, the botanical monuments, activists and actors, and of course the Nieuwe Instituut, Paula, Tijn, and the whole team, particularly of hospitality. And I'm inspired by the words, let's all contribute a little bit to imagine a more flourishing future. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Have a lovely day, and join me if you still want to be another panel at AFFR. Bye.